Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Then Al-Imam Muslim says, Kitab al-Nikah, the book of al-Nikah. And in this first chapter, we look at the recommendation of getting married for the one who desires it and has the ability to pay for it. And as for the one who is unable to, then he is recommended to fast. Before the hadith, let's just understand this word al-Nikah. In the Sharia, it normally means the marriage contract. This is the meaning most often intended. Originally and linguistically, it means to have sexual intercourse with a woman. And you can see the link there quite clearly. So for example, in Surah An-Nisa, Allah Jalla wa Ala says, وَلَا تَنْكِحُوا مَا نَكَحَ آبَاؤُكُم مِّنَ النِّسَاءِ. And do not make nikah with those women whom your fathers have made a nikah with. Now this word nikah in this context means the marriage contract. It does not mean the act of sexual intercourse. So what this ayah is telling us is that any woman whom your father has married, you are not allowed to marry forever. But supposing if your father commits zina with a particular woman, does she now become haram for you to marry? The answer is no. Why is this? Because your father did not make an official nikah contract with her, and zina is not a nikah contract, and it does not carry any of the rulings of nikah. Or when Allah Jalla wa Ala says in Surah Al-Baqarah, فَإِن طَلَّقَهَا فَلَا تَحِلُّ لَهُ مِن بَعْدُ حَتَّى تَنْكِحَ زَوْجًا غَيْرَهُ. Now here some scholars say that the word nikah, or tankiha in this case, means to have sexual intercourse. So then the ayah would be that if he divorces her, she will not be allowed for him to remarry until she has sexual intercourse with another husband. Because you can only have intercourse after the marriage, after the man becomes your husband. The other opinion is that the word nikah here needs to mean a contract, not the actual sexual intercourse, because the woman does not make nikah if we take the word nikah to mean sexual intercourse, because nikah means to have intercourse with a woman, not with a man. And this is probably the stronger opinion. Okay, what is the nikah contract? It's translated to marriage, but it is a contract between a man and a woman who are both eligible for the purpose of the benefits of this contract. Note here, we will not say for the purpose of having children, because having children is just one of the many benefits of this contract. The nikah is not just recommended for this ummah, but it is the sunnah of all the messengers. Allah Jalla wa Ala says, وَلَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا رُسُلًا مِّن قَبْلِكَ وَجَعَلْنَا لَهُمْ أَزْوَاجًا وَذُرِّيَّةً. And we sent messengers before you, and we made for them wives and children. But is it wajib? Some ulama say it is wajib in the absolute sense for every young person who is able to do so. They take their evidence from the hadith coming up, and also from another hadith in which some people said that they will not get married and they just want to devote themselves to this deen. The Prophet rebuked them for it. Other scholars hold a more balanced view. They say it is only wajib for the one who fears zina. But even if we say it is not wajib, the minimum we will say is that it is highly recommended, because you will be benefiting not just yourself, but also the rest of the ummah. Let's take our first hadith. One of the tabi'een, Alqamah, he reports that he was walking with Abdullah ibn Mas'ud, and they met Uthman ibn Affan, who was the Khalifa at that time. And he started to talk to Ibn Mas'ud, and he asked him, should we not marry you to a girl, so that she may help you recall some of the past of your bygone days? What he intends by this is that if a man marries a young girl, definitely his desire in the female will strengthen, just like the desire of a young man. So to that, Ibn Umar replied, لَإِن قُلْتَ ذَاكَ لَقَدْ قَالَ رَسُولُ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وَسَلَّمَ يَا مَعْشَرَ الشَّبَابِ مَنِ اسْتَطَاعَ مِنْكُمُ الْبَاءَةَ فَلْيَتَزَوَّجْ فَإِنَّهُ أَغَضُّ لِلْبَصَرِ وأحسن للفرج ومن لم يستطع فعليه بالصوم فإنه له وجاء. He said, if you say this, then the Prophet had said, O group of young people, whomsoever amongst you is able to afford the marriage expenses, then let him get married, because this marriage will be better to lower your gaze and better for your chastity. And whoever is unable to, then let him fast, because this will crush his sexual desire. The word in the hadith, al-ba'a, some scholars said that it means sexual intercourse. Others said that it means the expenses of the marriage. And this latter opinion is likely to be the correct one, because the Prophet was speaking to young people, and of course they are able to have sexual intercourse. Their desire is going to be stronger than the desire of an old person. In this hadith, the Prophet mentions two benefits of the marriage contract. Firstly, that it lowers your gaze, or it helps you to lower your gaze. And secondly, it keeps you chaste. So it is far less likely that you will be involved with zina. But of course, marriage has many benefits. The benefit of having children and to raise a family. The benefits of companionship from your wife and children. The benefits of having children to look after you in your old age. From the benefits is that it will increase the ummah. From the benefits also is the reward for the upkeep of your wife and children. And from the benefits is that you are able as a parent to become a role model to your children, whereas that would not be possible if you did not have children. And being a role model puts you in a position of responsibility, and that gives you an incentive to improve your own character. So these are from the benefits, but the Prophet mentioned two benefits which are most pertinent to young men whom he was addressing. And he says that whoever is unable to do so, then let him fast. And this is because fasting will zap you of your sexual energy. As you know, when you are fasting, you are in this sacred state, very much like if you are in the state of prayer or in the state of ihram during the Hajj or the Umrah. So fasting is also a sacred state, and you are less likely then to be committing sins and more self-conscious of yourself with regards to what you do, how you act, and what you say. So the advice to the ones who are unable to afford getting married is to fast. If even that is not possible, then they have to refrain from any zina or premarital relationship. As Allah Jalla wa Ala says in Surah An-Nur, وَلْيَسْتَعْفِفِ الَّذِينَ لَا يَجِدُونَ نِكَاحًا حَتَّى يُغْنِيَهُمُ اللَّهُ مِنْ فَضْلِهِ. And those who do not find a means for marriage, then let them refrain from committing zina or any premarital relationship until Allah enriches them from His bounty. In another narration in the chapter, Abdullah ibn Mas'ud said, I lost no time in marrying. And so we take the valuable mannerisms of the Sahaba, that they would not waste any time in pursuing the good. So when you know something is the sunnah, then you do not hesitate in pursuing it. And as for those who reject the sunnah, reject what Allah Jalla wa Ala has revealed, then they are in great danger that Allah Jalla wa Ala will misguide them by overturning their hearts and their vision, so that they do not understand the truth when they see it. Allah Jalla wa Ala says, وَنُقَلِّبُ أَفْئِدَتَهُمْ وَأَبْصَارَهُمْ كَمَا لَمْ يُؤْمِنُوا بِهِ أَوَّلَ مَرَّةٍ وَنَذَرُهُمْ فِي طُغْيَانِهِمْ يَعْمَهُونَ. And we turn their hearts and their vision, just as they did not believe the first time, and we leave them in their trespasses, wandering blindly. So these are the people who cannot understand the truth, and they cannot see the truth. Rather, they see the falsehood as the truth, and the truth as the falsehood. May Allah Jalla wa Ala protect us from such a state. Let's take this next hadith. From Anas, he reports that a group of the companions came and asked the wives of the Prophet about the Prophet's private life. And when they were told about the Prophet's private life and his high status and high standards that he had, they felt that their deeds were nothing compared to his. And in response, out of their zeal, one of them said, لا أتزوج النساء, I will not marry women. Another one said, لا آكل اللحم, I will not eat meat. And another one said, لا أنام على فراش, I will not sleep on a mattress. And to this, when the Prophet heard what they had said, he praised Allah and extolled Him, and he gave an address to the people in general. He said, ما بال أقوام قالوا كذا وكذا لكني أصلي وأنام وأصوم وأفطر وأتزوج النساء فمن رغب عن سنتي فليس مني. What is the matter with some people? They say such and such things. But I pray and I sleep, and I fast and I break my fast, and I marry women. Whoever is not happy with my sunnah, then he is not from me. We take from this hadith that anyone who leaves off marriage for the sake of worship, thinking that this is going to draw him closer to Allah, is going to give him more time to worship and to separate himself from this life, be like one of those monks that you see from the Christians. If this is the reason why he leaves off nikah, then this is a bid'ah. it is not going to draw him closer to Allah Jalla wa'ala. The same thing with eating meat and sleeping on a bed. If he does this as an act of ta'abbud, an act of devotion to Allah Jalla wa'ala, then this is all a bid'ah. We also take the vital lesson that the Prophet ﷺ gave an address in public, so that not only these 3 young men would take the message, but also everyone else would take the message as well, because there could be others who are thinking the same way these 3 men were thinking. So you do not shame somebody up publicly, but rather you speak in general terms. And let's take the final hadith of the chapter. Sa'ad ibn Abi Waqqas said that the Prophet ﷺ forbade Uthman ibn Mad'un radiallahu an from at-tabattul, which is when you cut yourself off from the world, just worshipping Allah Jalla wa'ala. And he says that if the Prophet had allowed him to make at-tabattul, we would have got ourselves castrated. So that is to crush our sexual desire. But immediately a person may ask, but does Allah Jalla wa'ala not say in the Quran, وَتَبَتَّلْ إِلَيْهِ تَبَتِيلًا, and cut yourself off completely to Allah Jalla wa'ala? Well, the answer to this apparent conflict is that in the Quran, tabattul means to worship Him properly. Properly meaning sincerely, with full devotion. It does not mean to leave off the nikah. Whereas in this hadith, the word tabattul is intended to mean leaving off nikah, so that you may just devote yourself to worship. So whereas the wording is the same, tabattul, but the intended meaning behind it is different. And then as for castration, then even if tabattul was allowed, meaning leaving off marriage and just devoting your time to worship, even if that was allowed, still castration would not be permitted, because cutting off your testicles is mutilation and you are not permitted to mutilate yourself. We have the narration in the Kitabul Iman where a man was suffering an injury, and in order to relieve himself, he cut off his fingers and bled to death. So in other words, he committed suicide. And another companion saw this man in his dream, and he asked him, "How did your Rabb treat you?" And he said, "He treated me well." And he saw him that he was hiding his hand, and he asked him, "Why are you hiding your hand?" And the man said, the one who killed himself and is appearing now in the dream, that Allah told him, "La nuslihu ma afsadta." We will not repair what you yourself have corrupted. So even though Allah Jalla wa'ala forgave this man for making hijrah, despite the fact that he committed suicide. So this man who committed suicide was in Jannah because he made hijrah because of his righteous actions. But despite that, Allah is not going to rectify what he himself, meaning the man himself, corrupted or damaged. And when the Prophet heard this dream, he made dua, Allahumma wali yadayhi faghfir. O Allah, and forgive his hands also. And let us just go back to the first hadith, where the Prophet encouraged those who are unable to get married to fast. He did not tell them to masturbate, which is what many people ask about. Certainly, that would have been easier to crush your desire, but the Prophet told them to fast. As far as masturbation is concerned, then generally it is impermissible, unless for 2 reasons. Number 1, if not doing so will cause medical harm, and number 2, if not doing so, one fears that he will actually fall into zina. So the first one is a medical reason, and the second one is a shar'i reason. So other than these 2 reasons, one needs to keep away from such practice, and it must not become a habitual practice for anyone, such that somebody does it on a regular basis, much like how somebody practices a hobby on a regular basis. Let us now move to the next chapter in the Kitab al-Nikah, and this is about the chapter where if a person sees another woman, an ajnabiyya woman, which stirs up desire in him, then he should have conjugal relations with his wife to get rid of that desire. From Jabir ibn Abdullah, that the Prophet saw a woman, a non-mahram woman, and then after that he went to his wife Zainab as she was tanning leather, and he had conjugal relations with her. He then said to his companions, إِنَّ الْمَرْأَةَ تُقْبِلُ فِي صُورَةِ شَيْطَانٍ وَتُدْبِرُ فِي صُورَةِ شَيْطَانٍ فَإِذَا أَبْصَرَ أَحَدُكُمْ إِمْرَأَةً فَلْيَأْتِ أَهْلَهُ فَإِنَّ ذَلِكَ يَرُدُّ مَا فِي نَفْسِهِ. He said the woman advances in the form of a shaitan, and she turns away in the form of a shaitan. So when one of you sees a woman, then he should have conjugal relations with his wife, because that will repel any desire which he finds in himself for that woman. From this hadith, let it be known that you do not control the desire that enters into your heart. Sometimes you can see something which produces desire inside you. Your eyes, as well as your ears, are canals to the heart. And what you see and what you hear makes its way into the heart. And this is why it is vital that you control that which you see and that which you hear, lest it should have a detrimental effect on your heart and ruin you. However, having said that, there will be times when you will see things which produce desire in your heart. That is most likely to happen, even though you cannot control it. So if such a thing does happen, then in this hadith we find a benefit of the nikah, which is that you are able to get rid of this desire by having conjugal relations with your wife. So that is to say, you channel your desire through the halal means as opposed to the haram means. We take from this hadith that even if a man's wife is busy doing something, her priority is to answer the call of the husband in conjugal relations. This is the case as long as the husband does not distract her from her obligatory duties of the prayer, let's say, or the fasting, because the rights of Allah take priority over the rights of the husband. We also take from this hadith the simple lifestyle that they would live. Here is Zainab radiallahu anha, the wife of the Prophet. She was tanning leather. It indicates to us that their lifestyle was a very simple one, not one of luxury. What about the part where he says that the woman advances in the image of a shaitan and leaves or goes away in the image of shaitan? It does not mean that the woman is a shaitan, and that much is clear. What it does mean is that the shaitan beautifies or adorns the image of a woman in your eye. So this woman may well be the ugliest woman on the planet, but as she approaches you, you will see her as the most beautiful woman in the world. And likewise if she moves away, so she has her back turned to you. She may be the ugliest woman, but in your eyes, she will seem like the most beautiful woman. And this is just a novelty. It wears off very soon. But the point is, the shaitan adorns all of this in your eyes, so that you are encouraged to commit zina. The next chapter about the mut'ah, which is a temporary marriage, and how it was halal first, but then became haram. The temporary marriage, the mut'ah, is a marriage which is limited to a specific time. It might be 1 week, it could be a month, it could be a year, but the point is, it is limited. Let's take one of the hadith in this chapter. Abdullah ibn Mas'ud reports that we were on a military expedition with the Prophet and we did not have any wives. So we asked the Prophet, shall we not get ourselves castrated so we would not have any desire? And the Prophet forbade that, and he allowed them a temporary marriage, a mut'ah, where he would give some clothing as the mahr. And then Abdullah ibn Mas'ud recited the ayah, يا أيها الذين آمنوا لا تحرموا طيبات ما أحل الله لكم ولا تعتدوا إن الله لا يحب المعتدين. O you have Iman, do not make haram the good things which Allah has made halal for you, and do not transgress. Verily Allah does not love the transgressors. So looking at this narration, we find that the mut'ah was permitted. And in other narrations of the chapter, we find that it was permitted during the year of the conquest of Mecca, which would be the 8th year. Another narration in the same chapter from Sabra al-Juhani, from his father, that the Prophet ﷺ said, يا أيها الناس إني قد كنت أذنت لكم في الاستمتاع من النساء وإن الله قد حرم ذلك إلى يوم القيامة فمن كان عنده منهن شيء فليخلي سبيله ولا تأخذوا مما آتيتموهن شيئا. O people, I had permitted the mut'ah marriage with women, but Allah has now made it haram up till Yawm al-Qiyamah. So, whoever has a wife in the mut'ah marriage, then let him release her from the marriage bond, and do not take back any of the mahr that you have given them. So we find in this hadith that there is a clear case of naskh, or abrogation. Mut'ah was halal and now it is not halal. And when we say mut'ah, we mean the mut'ah of the marriage, as opposed to the mut'ah in the Hajj, where you perform the Umrah and the Hajj in one journey. and making the ihlal in between the two ihrams that you have between the Umrah and the Hajj. There are some narrations in this chapter which say that the mut'ah marriage was practiced during the time of the Prophet and also during the time of Abu Bakr and Umar when they were the Khulafa. But we would have to understand that narration to be that only those who did not have knowledge of the naskh would practice it. After that, Umar radiallahu anh forbade it for whoever was practicing this. Otherwise, we know naskh cannot happen after the time of the Prophet. We also have a narration from Iyas ibn Salama from his father, who says that the Prophet gave a rukhsa, or gave a permission, in the year of the Awdas, which is the 8th year, to have the mut'ah marriage contract. He gave this permission for 3 days, and then he forbade it. The conquest of Mecca, the conquest of Ta'if, happened during the 8th year, and this is also called the year of the Awdas. In the chapter, we also have another narration from Ali ibn Abi Talib, who says that on the day of Khaybar, which was before the conquest of Mecca, he says the Prophet forbade donkey meat and the mut'ah marriage. But if that is the case, then it would mean that the mut'ah was halal, then it was made haram on the day of Khaybar, when the Muslims conquered Khaybar. Then, on the 8th, which was the year of the conquest, it was made halal again, and then thereafter made haram. So the ruling was abrogated then twice, and this seems strange. Now, some scholars may well hold the view that, fine, it was made halal twice and made haram twice, and the matter ended with it being haram up till Yawm al-Qiyamah, as we have just heard. Ibn al-Qayyim rahimahullah says that the narration of Ali ibn Abi Talib, who says that the Prophet forbade the mut'ah marriage on the day of Khaybar, he says that is a mistake. Rather, the narration should have been that the Prophet just forbade the donkey meat on the day of Khaybar. It should not have the words that the Prophet forbade the mut'ah marriage, and that the mut'ah marriage was only made halal for 3 days during the year of the conquest of Mecca, and then thereafter immediately made haram. So if we go by that opinion, then it means that the mut'ah marriage was just made halal out of darura for a short while, and then in the same year it was made haram up till Yawm al-Qiyamah. And that does appear to be much more of a simple and straightforward view. Or the way we may understand this narration of Ali ibn Abi Talib is that the Prophet made mut'ah haram, and on the day of Khaybar made the donkey meat haram. So the day of Khaybar is specific to the donkey meat being made haram, and nothing to do with the mut'ah of marriage. What's particularly interesting here is that this narration is by Ali ibn Abi Talib, who is the great Imam of the Rawafid Shia. Yet, they allow the mut'ah marriage. Isn't that strange? Also, Ali ibn Abi Talib is one of those who has reported that you are allowed to wipe over the socks. Yet the Rawafid Shia do not wipe over the socks. Yet another strange case. Let us now move to the next chapter, which talks about the prohibition of combining between a woman and her aunt in marriage. From Abu Hurairah radiallahu anhu, that the Prophet ﷺ said, لا يجمع بين المرأة وعمتها ولا بين المرأة وخالتها, that a woman and her paternal aunt should not be combined in marriage, nor a woman and her maternal aunt should be combined in marriage. That is to say simply that you're not allowed to be married to a woman and her paternal or maternal aunt at the same time. This hadith can be added to the ayah in the Quran in Surah An-Nisa, وَأَن تَجْمَعُوا بَيْنَ الْأُخْتَيْنِ إِلَّا مَا قَدْ سَلَفَ, and that you should combine between two sisters except that which has passed. So we find from the ayah that you're not allowed to combine between two sisters in marriage either, regardless of whether these are two full sisters or half sisters or two sisters from breastfeeding. Okay, what about combining between a woman and her cousin? That is to say, the daughter of her maternal or paternal aunt, or perhaps the daughter of her maternal or paternal uncle. Well, this is permissible. Why is it permissible? Simply because there is no evidence to suggest that it is impermissible. And the principle is, or if you like, the default ruling is that all women are halal to be married except those that Allah has made haram. As Allah Jalla wa Ala says, وَأُحِلَّ لَكُمْ مَا وَرَاءَ ذَلِكُمْ, when He speaks about those women forbidden in marriage. What about combining between a woman and the former wife of her father? Well, as long as the wife of her father is not her mother, then yes, it is permissible to combine between these two women. Why? Because there is no evidence to say that it is haram, and the asl is that it is halal. What about combining between a woman and her daughter, that is, her biological daughter, or her daughter through breastfeeding? Well, here it is not permissible because you're not allowed to combine between a woman and her daughter, and the Quran forbids this. In fact, the matter is not about combining. If you are married to a woman whom you have consummated marriage with, then her daughter will be haram for you forever. So even if you divorce this wife of yours, her daughter will still be haram for you to marry forever, on the condition, like we just said before, that you have consummated marriage with this woman. So basically, if you marry a woman, then this woman's mother and her daughter are both haram for you forever. The only difference is your wife's mother becomes haram for you forever through merely the marriage contract, and as for the daughter of your wife, then she becomes haram for you forever if you have consummated marriage with this wife of yours. But if you have not, and let us suppose you divorce her before consummating marriage with her, then yes, her daughter is halal for you. The evidence for this particular ruling about your wife's daughter is when Allah Jalla wa Ala says, وَرَبَائِبِكُمُ اللَّاتِي فِي حُجُورِكُمْ مِن نِّسَائِكُمُ اللَّاتِي دَخَلْتُم بِهِنَّ فَإِن لَّمْ تَكُونُوا دَخَلْتُم بِهِنَّ فَلَا جُنَاحَ عَلَيْكُمْ. So if you have not consummated marriage with them, then there is no problem or no sin upon you if you marry the daughter of your wife. But of course, in order to marry her, you will have to divorce this wife of yours, because combining between them is not permitted. Is it permissible to combine between two sisters from breastfeeding? Well, most scholars say it is haram. Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah, however, says it is halal, because these are not two sisters related through blood, either full sisters or half sisters. What the Shaykh says is that the reason for the prohibition of combining between these two types of women is that two wives, that is to say co-wives, will have rivalry between them. They will feel jealousy and rivalry. Now, if this happens between two related people, meaning two people related by blood, then this could lead to a cutting off of ties of kinship. And of course that is haram, a major sin, no doubt. But this fear is not the case between two sisters through breastfeeding, because there is no ties of kinship between them, that is to say, blood ties, so that you do not need to keep ties of kinship with your siblings through breastfeeding, but you do with your full siblings or half siblings. However, on the other hand, we do have the hadith, يَحْرُمُ مِنَ الرَّضَاعَ مَا يَحْرُمُ مِنَ النَّسَبِ. Whatever is haram through the blood relation is also haram through the breastfeeding relation. Now, there's no doubt that practically speaking, we ought to follow the opinion of the majority, because it's not like it's some sort of necessity that you must combine between two women who are sisters through breastfeeding. Here, we can easily take the safer option and say no. You're not allowed to combine between two women who are sisters through breastfeeding. And it's not like that there's a shortage of women. In fact, if anything, it's the other way around. Okay, what about combining between a woman and the aunt of her mother? So that's not her aunt, which would be her mother's sister. We're talking about her mother's aunt. So that is to say, her mother's mother's sister. So if you like, her great aunt. And the answer to that is that your great aunt takes the same ruling as your aunt, and your great great aunt takes the same ruling as your aunt. It's the same thing, and it is impermissible. Likewise with the paternal aunt as well. So you're not allowed to combine between a woman and her father's sister, and you're not allowed to similarly combine between a woman and her father's father's sister. Also in the chapter from Abu Hurairah, he says that the Prophet forbade that a woman should be married along with her paternal aunt or maternal aunt, and that also a woman should ask for the divorce of her sister in order to deprive her of what belongs to her. For Allah Azza wa Jalla is her sustainer or provider. We also find in the chapter the Prophet forbade that a man should propose to a woman when his brother has already done so, and that a man should, in a business dealing, offer a price to the vendor when his brother has already done so. The reason for these rules should be clear because they create enmity and opposition, and that's completely inimical to the idea of brotherhood in the deen. However, if you know that your brother has given up on the proposal, then you are allowed to propose to that woman, but not whilst the proposition is in effect. Maybe the woman is thinking about whether to accept his proposal or not. In a case like this, you are certainly not allowed to propose against his proposal. What about if your brother has proposed and you are not sure whether he has been accepted or not? Are you allowed to propose? The answer is no. You must be sure that he has been rejected, and then you are allowed to propose. Or another possibility could be that he allows you to propose to her. If that's the case, then it becomes known that he has given up on the proposal, and it is now permissible for you to propose to her. What about if you yourself ask his permission to propose to that woman? So you say to him that you have known that he has proposed to a woman, but you ask him whether you could propose to her, and he allows you to do so. Are you allowed to propose to her? Well, here you have to take a look. If he genuinely does allow you, then yes, you're allowed to. However, sometimes people may allow you to do something, or perhaps they may give you something out of embarrassment. That is, that they would feel embarrassed of feeling selfish, of being deemed or judged to be selfish and self-centered if they did not allow you, or if they did not give something to you. In a case like this, they are not giving you this gift or this permission out of their own good will. It is the same as if they are being forced to give you, and in such a case, you are not permitted to accept. What about offering a price in opposition to the price which your brother has offered? One might say, are auctions haram then? Auctions are not haram, because in an auction, both the vendor and the customers, they all come together, and we all know that they're going to compete with each other, so it is known, and by mutual consent. What the hadith is talking about here are moments other than the auction. So it's basically you butt in with your lower price. So hopefully the vendor will sell to you rather than to your brother, and that is not allowed. And we can also add the ijara contract to this as well. Ijara meaning a hiring contract. So a person has hired your brother in the deen to work for him for £100. You cannot now say that I will work for you for £90. Or for example, your brother is hiring out a house for £100 per month. You cannot now go and say, no, hire it out to me for £110 per month. I will pay you more. You are not allowed to do that, because this is all an udwan, an aggression, a transgression against your brother. The hadith does use the word brother. Does this also, however, include a kafir? The answer is yes, it does include a dhimmi kafir, or a mu'ahad, or a musta'man, because these types of people, their lives and their wealth and their honor is to be protected. The narration also says that it is not permissible for a woman to ask for the divorce of her sister. So this would be a case where a man proposes to her, but this man already has a wife, and she says, I'll marry you on the condition that you divorce your first wife. This type of condition is not to be respected, and it is haram for her to stipulate this. He says that this is not allowed because she will deprive the first wife of what belongs to her. This is because the husband provides for the wife. Now, if the husband divorces the wife, who will provide for her? She will lose the breadwinner. Okay, so we know that such a condition is not to be respected. What if the husband says, yes, okay, I accept, and then afterwards he does not respect the condition to divorce the first wife? Is this second wife now within her rights to annul this marriage contract? The answer is that it depends. If the wife making this condition, so that's the second wife, knew that such a condition is haram, so for example she has read this hadith which we are quoting, then she is not within her rights to annul the contract, because she knows what she did was wrong and impermissible. As for if she did not know this ruling, then she is within her rights to annul the contract. What about if a woman makes a condition that if you marry me, you will not marry in future anyone against me? This is a valid condition to make, because here now she is not asking for the man to divorce any woman. She is just asking him not to marry a woman in the future whilst he is married to her. And that is well within her rights. And clearly, in this example, she is not transgressing against anyone. Whereas in the first example, she clearly is. We also take a vital lesson about the words we use. Notice that the Prophet uses the word brother, that you should not propose against the proposal of your brother. He did not say against the proposal of another man. And that you should not make a deal against the deal of your brother. He did not say against the deal of another man. This is because the word brother produces feeling of love and relationship, whereas the words another man would not. They will produce this feeling of being distanced. So look at the clever usage of the words. Now the word brother is used, like we said before. A kafir who is to be respected in terms of his wealth and body and honor, you're not allowed to transgress against him either. So if he's proposing to, let's say, a Christian woman, you are not allowed to propose to this Christian woman whilst his proposition is still in effect. And we say that the reason why the Prophet used the word brother is because this is most often the case. In a Muslim country, if you transgress against someone, he is likely to be your brother, because there are mainly Muslims in a Muslim country. And it's the same how he uses the word sister. A woman should not ask for the divorce of her sister. That would include a Christian or a Jewish woman as well. If a Muslim man is married to a Christian or Jewish woman and then he proposes to a Muslim woman, that Muslim woman is not allowed to ask him to divorce the Christian or Jewish wife. Let's take a few more points of benefit. We know that castrating yourself is muthla or mutilation, and that is impermissible. But what about taking medication to suppress your sexual desire? Is that permissible? And the answer is yes, it is, as long as the medication itself is not going to produce more harm than good, and that this is not the same as cutting off any part of the body. And the ruling on the marriage is that it is wajib if a person fears falling into zina. It is mustahab if a person has desire of a sexual nature but does not fear falling into zina. And it is mubah for a person who does not have sexual desire. And it is haram if you're in Darul Harb, because of the fear that your wife and children could be taken as prisoners of war. The only ruling which we do not find is makruh. As for the mut'ah, some of the Shia may argue that it is in the Quran, where Allah Jalla wa Ala says in Surah An-Nisa, فَمَسْتَمْتَعْتُمْ بِهِ مِنْهُنَّ فَآتُوهُنَّ أُجُورَهُنَّ. When you make mut'ah with them, then give them their wages, meaning their mahar. But this enjoyment is the enjoyment in a valid marriage contract, not a mut'ah contract, because this is what the context of the ayah is all about. Now the mut'ah is in essence no different to zina. However, if the Sharia allows it, then it is allowed, because the matter is not in our hands. Another issue is, what if a man marries a woman intending to divorce her after a specific period, but that is not stipulated in the marriage contract? Well, here, technically it is not mut'ah, because there's no stipulation, which would mean that it is a valid marriage contract. But even if we say it is a valid marriage contract, there is still the problem of deception, because here the woman and the father of the woman is thinking that this man is dedicated to the wife and will live with her and support her. This is what they're thinking, and yet the man is harboring different intentions. So there's an element of deception. Would any man be happy with this for his daughter? Well, the answer is no. And so we would strongly discourage people from entering into these types of contracts, because you need to be open and honest and transparent. Your inside should be the same as your outside. Also, the rule about combining between two women would be that if we were to suppose that one is a male and the other is a female, and we ask the question, would marriage be permissible between the two? If marriage would not be permissible between the two, then you're not allowed to combine between those two types of women. If marriage would be permissible between the two, then you are allowed to combine between those two types of women. So for example, you can combine between two cousins who are not sisters. Why? Because marriage between two cousins is permissible. Let's take some review questions at this point. So question number 1. Explain what a nikah means linguistically and technically, and then state 3 benefits of this contract. Question number 2. Are you allowed to combine marriage between 2 cousins? Explain your answer. Question number 3. Can you combine between a woman and her great aunt? That would be to say the aunt of her mother or her father. Explain your answer here. Question number 3. Ibn Taymiyyah rahimahullah says you can combine between 2 women who are sisters through breastfeeding, so not through blood. Explain why he holds this opinion, and then explain in practicality what you would advise people to do.